Good evening, and welcome to day one of the Foster-Foreman Conference of Distinguished Writers. My name is Walter Middlebrook, Foster Professor of Practice in the Journalism Department of the Donald B. Belisario College of Communications. In the late 1990s, Larry Foster had a vision to improve the quality of writing at Penn State. A 1948 graduate, former newspaperman, a highly successful public relations executive, and an author, Larry understood that good writing was the essence of what we do in the college. So he and his wife, Ellen, a 1949 graduate, endowed the Foster Professorship in Communications. In 1999, Larry Foster asked Gene Foreman, a nationally renowned newsroom manager of the Philadelphia Inquirer, to become the first Foster professor. Gene also knew something about writing. During his quarter century at the Inquirer, the paper won 18 Pulitzers and became known not only for its hard-hitting investigative reporting, but for its compelling writing. Larry and Gene established this two-day conference to bring the country's most respected journalists to campus. Since 1999, we've had presentations by nearly 50 Pulitzer winners. Gene and his successor, Tom Barberi, a former managing editor at the Baltimore Sun, left a legacy with this program, and it is my challenge to build on that foundation. Larry Foster, our beloved benefactor, and to whom we'll be forever indebted, died in 2013. Now, let me give you a brief word about today's format. First, we'll have our keynote address. Then our speaker will be joined by Peter Bhatia, the college's Foster Professor in Residence, who will moderate a question and answer session that we hope will lead to an even more and fruitful discussion on writing and journalism. There will be mics available, but I think we may not need them. I know the speaker and I know you. That may not happen. Now back to our program. As we constantly remind you students, our students, good writing can't happen without good reporting. Today's speaker personifies that characteristic. You can't walk into a room without trying to learn everything about everyone in that room. And that is the story of today's speaker. An author and magazine contributor, Tom Hallman Jr. most recently left Portland, Oregonian, where he had been a senior writer for more than 40 years. He won the 2001 Pulitzer Prize for his series of articles about a boy named Sam, whose face was severely disfigured. Tom's work has appeared in Esquire, Men's Health, Reader's Digest, Writer's Digest, and a number of other magazines. He's won every major feature writing award in the nation. Born and raised in Portland, Tom graduated from Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa in 1977. By every means of the words, Tom is a survivor who understands the hard knocks of life. He says he survived because of his many failures. I'll let you be the judge of that. What I do know is that the man loves to tell a good story, and I'm sure you're in for a few. It is my honor and with great pleasure that I bring to you this old school reporter, writer. Please join me in welcoming our 2025 Foster-Foreman speaker, Tom Hallman Jr. Thank you, Walter.
There's something about this that bothered me. Since the beginning of time, long before books, screens, or even written language, people gather around fires under starlit skies to tell stories. Stories about who we are, where we've been, what we dream of becoming. They have been our first form of communication, the thread that ties one human heart across another through generations and cultures. Storytelling is not just entertainment. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we share wisdom, heal pain, inspire courage, ignite change. Every great movement, every breakthrough, every act of compassion has at its heart a story powerful enough to move people from silence to action. The truth of us, everyone has a story that matters. But somewhere along the way, a new generation of journalists, many of whom enter this craft with passion and purpose, have begun to lose sight of that truth. In an age of algorithms, headlines, metrics, our industry has started to confuse information with storytelling. We chase clicks instead of connection, speed instead of substance. We tell people what happened, but too often we forget to show why it matters. or who it touches or what it reveals about the human spirit. The power of storytelling isn't in the number of views a piece receives, it's in the number of hearts it reaches. Journalism was never meant to just be the transmission of facts. It's meant to be the translation of experience. When we forget that, we don't just fail as journalists, we fail as storytellers. And as citizens of the world, we need storytelling more than ever. As Walter said, I retired after 45 years at the Oregonian. I've won every prize you can win. Two-time Pulitzer finalist, all the stuff. Written 5 books. One of my stories was made into a movie starring Bill Macy. I got no royalties from it. I'm still smarting over it. My stories have been on ABC, 2020, CBS Morning News, and NPR. You should not listen to me because of my resume. Those are just titles, just accolades. They don't define the power of story, and they don't explain why it matters or why you should even care about what I'm going to talk about tonight. So let me come down from the pedestal and talk to you. I was fired from my first job. I was a copy editor for like a home decorating magazine in New York City. I could care less about carpet weaves, how crystals look, and it showed. Eventually, I packed my things, and that's a whole nother story, and made my way back home to Portland. I worked as a bartender, and I had to be a bouncer until I found a job at a small weekly paper in Eastern Oregon. One afternoon, while flipping through editor and publisher, and I'm really dating myself, that I found an opening at a Salem paper. Not as a reporter, as a copy editor. I applied thinking it might be a chance to escape the watermelon capital of Oregon, Hermiston. 3 weeks later, I received this letter from the editor. Dear Mr. Hallman, we are seeking an experienced copy editor. Your credentials do not suggest you would fit that bill. Politics, incidentally, is not spelled Politics. In time, I worked at a small, mid-sized paper in Eastern Washington. Then I was hired at the Oregon, and that's a whole other story. In the early days, including me, nobody expected I would amount to anything more than a police reporter covering breaking news. I mean, really, I was the longest of long shots. So how did I get to where I am now? It's a question I often ask myself at my age, reflecting on the unexpected path that storytelling has taken me on. And as I trace back through the years, through the interviews, the writing, the moments of connection, I realized the journey wasn't about crafting the words or finding the perfect angle for a story. It was about recognizing the profound power of simply listening, really listening to people. And that's what I've been doing my entire professional life. I ask questions, I listen, then I ask more questions. The simple act of engaging, of opening the door to someone's heart, is where the magic happens. We are bombarded with facts. Anyone with a cell phone can figure out anything right now in an instant. But the answers to our greatest questions come from storytelling. That's what gives us the meaning. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And for those answers, we turn to story. As a storyteller, my mission has always been to explore through people I meet their struggles and their triumphs and what it means to be alive. How do people find meaning? How do they live it out? And that's where the power of story lives. It encourages us to face our deepest desires for authenticity, for community, for mystery. Every obstacle in my storytelling career, finding the story, writing the story, and I've had plenty, has led me closer to the kind of story that matters most. It's taught me that stories worth pursuing are not polished or perfect. They're human, they're messy, and they're real. Most important, stories often begin in failure and the quiet courage to try again. What matters, what truly matters, is the stories we choose to tell and the stories we choose to listen to and the connections we make through them. It's the moment when we as human beings reach across a divide, when we allow someone's words to reach our heart. We were late. Because in this noisy world, it's only through the telling of stories we can find any meaning or purpose or connection. We need that more than ever right now. I've been given the privilege of hearing stories, and it's the responsibility to carry those stories forward in a way that connects and heals us and makes sense of our shared human experience. Our stories are constantly leaking out of us, little fragments tossed into the wind, unnoticed, and vanishing before anybody hears them, except the storyteller who listens. Tell me more about that. When a storyteller pauses long enough to see and listen, they gather those fragments and piece together a deeper narrative. I'll tell you, I like giving a real life example. I was at something and I was sitting on this table next to a doctor. He said, "My wife and I are downsizing and she wants me to get rid of all this stuff. And there's something I can't get rid of." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, I delivered babies for 50 years and every family sent me a picture of their newborn. It's in a book." I said, "Why don't you want to throw it away?" "I know. You tell me why you don't want to throw it away." There's a story there. I was at a press associates thing in Colorado. I'm an absolute loner. When there's a bunch of journalists, I'm going the other way. A woman walks by. I say, "How's your day going?" "It's going good." "What do you do here?" "I'm in charge of all the housekeeping." "That's great. How did it work?" "Well, my parents stuck in the country illegally. Was in Arizona. Moved to Colorado." I said, "That's amazing." She says, "You know what else is amazing? Next week, my son graduates from college." That's a story. Not a week goes by, even in retirement, that I don't feel the pull of a story. Someone who lets me just for a moment see their vulnerability, or a scene that calls me to something nobody else is noticing, because that's where the heart of storytelling lives. It's being acted out in front of you, and you have to notice it. It's in the quiet, unguarded moments most people overlook. I've always felt that my role as a storyteller is to work within the place between facts and the meaning behind them, because the truth isn't always clear cut. And the title of my latest collection of stuff is called Stories from the Banks, because the story of civilization, as I was telling one of the classes, a philosopher said, is on the banks, not in the river where there's murders and blood and all this bad stuff. It's on the banks where we raise families and have hopes and dreams, and that's what I cover. I write about the gray areas of life. I write about honor and compassion, fear and hope, regret, loneliness, and readers crave that. Here's a letter I got. "I'm a student at Oregon State University. I live in a fraternity, and my normal routine is to eat a bowl of cereal each morning and read the sports. Today was different. Someone had the sports. I began to read the front page and had to leave the room. I was crying, but I took the paper with me. I finished the article and realized I was still reading through tears." Another letter. "I started reading the story without checking the byline, but stopped after only a few sentences to confirm you were the writer. You seem to have a special gift for writing about these human beings who cause us to grapple with the mystery of grace." In 2016, I was sent down to Seaside. A cop was shot to death on the main street right in front of a restaurant. Reporters from the Pacific Northwest coming out there. Uh, all the TV people, the governor was going to give a speech at some convention center. I chose a different path. I have no interest in hearing a governor talk about a shooting. I don't, if the reporters are going there, I don't want to be part of them. So I chose a different path. I walked around town. I talked to people. I observed. Then what emerged was not a typical news story. I wrote the story in 1 hour sitting in a coffee shop. This myth about writing taking months, sometimes. But if you know what you're writing, you don't have to puzzle over it. The story ran on page one. Days later, I received an email from the cop's mother. Thanks again for your heartfelt words. They mean so much. God bless you. I wrote her back and I said, how are you coping? What one human would ask another, not a journalist. She wrote me back, and I have an earlier book that came out. She said, I read your book until 5:30 this morning. It doesn't diminish my sorrow, but it does give me hope. What a terrific storyteller you are. For all those hours of reading, I was spellbound and finally able to sleep. You gave me comfort as a total stranger. I now consider you a friend. In August, I turned 70, and I feel a little bit like that astronaut in 2001. You know, if he's going to the future or death or birth or whatever. Uh, and I have always been a storyteller. I didn't know it as a kid. And it's all because of my crazy background. I started working at 15 at a car wash. And I vacuumed out cars with bums. That's what we called the houseless people back then. And it was right across from the police station. And their buddies in the drunk tank would be yelling at them. And I'd be with the bums and talking to them about their life. In high school, I worked weekends and 3 afternoons a week as a bag boy at a grocery store. I attended 5 different schools from first grade before I graduated. I graduated in the bottom 25% of my class. When it came time for a recommendation, the counselor could only say, Tom comes from a good Christian home, and that was a lie. I applied to University of Missouri, went back there, and I asked about the tennis team. I didn't get in. Didn't get into University of Oregon. I got into college at Drake University on probation, where they made me take a reading course, and I'm a good reader. But it changed my life because I absolutely reinvented myself. Nobody knew me. I can still remember going to the dorm and going, I can be anybody I want. I realized it wasn't dumb, and I could get some good grades. During one summer, I worked at a Greyhound track. I met gamblers and every kind of low life you can imagine, and I loved it. Another summer, I worked at the VA pushing patients around from their room to their meetings, and I would talk to them like, what's it like here? What was the war like? Or what's going on in your life? My greatest teachers came not from the classroom, but from the world. A few months ago, I was cleaning out my files at home, and I found a letter I had written to my parents when I moved to New York City. Reading it now, decades later, I can still feel the wide-eyed kid behind these words, a kid who didn't even understand he was living a story. This is a letter. I woke up in the middle of the night and a cockroach was crawling across my bed and a mouse was on the floor next to me. The apartment is a depressing place. Every night I hear mice running around. One night I ordered pizza. The guy delivered it. I turned on the TV and began to eat. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the people and saw 2 men in suits. New York police, open up. Flashed a badge. I thought I was being evicted. I let them in. They said they were looking for someone in the building and asked if I knew him. I didn't. They glanced around my messy apartment, shook their head, and left. That was my life. A kid in a roach filled apartment, editing for a home decorating magazine and trying to figure out who he was and what he was meant to be. In that letter, after describing the chaos of my surroundings, I wrote something that still stops me today when I read it. Each day here I am challenged, and I must rely on my wits. One thing I've learned is to have confidence in myself, and I do. Years ago, I would have loved to get rid of my red curly hair and fit into the norm. No longer. My size and features make me stand out, and I love it. Even then, long before I'd written a story, the storyteller in me was forming. And the part that was forming was that life is messy. The struggle, the discomfort, the nights in the tiny apartment, getting fired. I took a loan out to go to New York. It was supposed to be an emergency fund. I bought a sectional sofa, hauled it up Broadway, bought a stereo classical records to impress women. I had to leave it all behind. Looking back now, I can see that I was learning to observe, to find beauty in the ordinary. I bought a guitar back then. I had to sell that, and an Italian woman came to buy it. So we went to her place, and she said, "Now, when my husband comes home, just tell him you're selling the guitar." And I came home, and he's real Italian. He goes, "You go back home and live with your family." My best friend was a black guy who came from Mississippi to be a singer. Didn't work out. I lived a diverse life. And I learned that storytelling isn't about perfection. It's about the truth at that moment. Somewhere along the way, I believe this industry has lost its way when it's come to storytelling. Now, don't get me wrong, we need investigative reporting. It's vital, holds power to account, it exposes injustice, it changes laws, saves lives. We need those stories, but we also need something else, something deeper that speaks to the human condition rather than the human system. Go to the Pulitzer website, pick any investigative story from 15, 20 years ago, read it, then pick one from the feature category and ask yourself which one still has power. More than likely, it's the feature story. Which one makes you feel something? The power of storytelling does not fade with time. It lives on in the hearts of the people who read it and the people who see themselves in those stories. Facts, no matter how shocking, have an absolutely short shelf life. They change as the next headline rolls in. But the stories, the real ones, endure because they reach the soul. They connect us across time, across circumstance, across everything that tries to divide us. For the past 15 years, I've been teaching a storytelling class, not to journalists, but to people who don't consider themselves as writers. These are teachers, nurses, engineers, business guys, retirees, people who never imagined they had a story worth telling. And here's the thing, I don't teach them writing. I teach them story thinking. The ability to see the stories in their own lives, to recognize moments that are vulnerable, powerful, and human. I help people uncover the universal themes that run through those experiences. What I've discovered is both humbling and inspiring. Many of my students are better storytellers than so-called professional journalists. Not because they've studied structure or mastered language, but because they're not jaded. They haven't been told what a story should look like. They haven't had their instincts edited out of them. They simply speak from the heart. All they need is encouragement, someone to tell them that those stories matter, that vulnerability is not a weakness, that truth told honestly is the most powerful form of writing there is. And when people tap into that, when they find the courage, their stories remind us that storytelling is about connection. It's a bridge between one human heart and another. Years ago, I was and this is a classic example of how some newsrooms, even the best of them, can mess it up. Portland has a Rose Festival where each high school picks a princess, and the princess does the court. It's been going on 100 years. I read a profile of one princess from a Catholic school who said her hero was her twin brother who had Down syndrome. And I thought, if something happened to the womb, maybe he's the valedictorian. She's the one with Down syndrome. I went to the reporter. Hey, do you mind if I ask about this? Ah, it's the Rose Festival. Who cares? I went to the city editor. Do you mind if who cares? It's the Rose Festival. Matters to me. I called the family, and you've heard me talk in class about this. Discovering the story, I talked to the father who cried. He said, "I'm an athlete, and when my son was born, I thought I'll never be able to play sports with him." Kind of interesting. I talked to the mom who talked to me about that night he was born and what their life was like. Then I talked to the princess. Somebody today asked me, "What about intrusive questions?" She told me, "Oh, he's my hero." And we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I said, "Colleen, that's great. but what's the truth? She started to cry. And she said, they went to middle school together. And the athletes would see her brother walking out of the hall and push him in the locker and knock the books out of his hand. And when he looked to her for help, she went the other way. You think there's a start of a story? Then I switched gears and I told the family, here's how I tell a story. Here's what I need. I need to get in your head and heart. She said, would you like to read my diary? You bet. The story was kind of complicated because the Catholic school would not let him go there. They thought he'd be a disruption. They sent him to a public school. He is taken under the wing by the football coach who lets him run out and pick up a tee when they kick off the ball. He can spell cat. His sister's going like this. There's a beautiful scene in the story. Remember, these are the kids who picked on him. They call him into the locker and they give him a Letterman's jacket. When the school won the state championship, he was the towel boy. Those same kind of athletes helped him up the ladder to cut down part of the net. So the story runs. The story that nobody wanted wins a national award, runs in Reader's Digest, and I got a freelance gig writing the piece about In the Voice of a 16-year-old Girl, which was a true challenge. The story reaches somebody in Nevada who takes the story to their school, and the high school coach reads it and says, I want to do something for the kids in our school. When the story was done, I used to get the metal plates for a story and give them to the families. And the mom called me and says, we learned something about ourselves in this story. We didn't know. I said, because we're intimate. That's what a story does. We're not recorders of events. We're interpreters of meaning. And our job is not only to inform us, to illuminate. One more little example. I used to go around for SPJ and do training seminars. They'd be at schools, but they'd bring in journalists from all over, and I'd talk. And I always would ask somebody, pitch me a story. Young girl, first job out of college, raises her hand. Says, I'm working on a story about the wrestling team. They said, there's a guy on the team that's won almost all his matches. And I said, I've read that story. That's not a story. I said, who else is on the team? There's a boy who's never won. I said, that's your story. I go back to Portland, like I do with all you. I say, email me. She emails me. So I talked to the boy, and he told me why he's wrestling. I said, he's not telling you the truth. That's not why he's wrestling. Go back. She said, I never learned how to report like this in school. She goes back. Turns out the boy's father, who had died, had been a wrestler. When he wrestled, he felt close to his father. I said, okay, now you report that. Now you got to structure it. She said, this is awful. I don't even know how to do this. I said, you got to do it. And she sent me stuff. I go, you're close, but not there. So she goes in and works on it. And she thought, the paper is going to fire me. An old timer came out from the press room and said, this is the best damn story I've ever read. It's not the writing. It's like, why do you wrestle? It's the why. Part of the reason we've lost our way is I think we have failed the young generation. And in doing so, we failed the readers. We have failed to mentor young potential storytellers. We failed to mentor young editors. We failed to tell them the truth, that this business, for all its nobility, is deeply insecure. We've painted the newsroom as a place of constant collaboration and purpose. In reality, it can be a place of doubt, competition, and fear. We don't tell these young people that jealousy is part of the fabric, that praise can be rare, and even some of the best storytellers you'll ever meet, I would call me this, quietly question whether their work still matters. And because we've avoided those truths, we've left too many young journalists unprepared for the emotional and creative weight of this work. You can go cover cops in some small town, you can cover City Hall, but unless you challenge yourself and have someone who can say you can do this, you will miss the stories that will make your career worthwhile. We've also made these young journalists think the storytelling is only about craft, about structure and leads and quotes. And I can talk all about that, but it's really about courage. It's about empathy. It's about having the heart to see people and then write their truth with grace and respect. We have failed to nurture that courage in young people. We failed to tell them that this path, this calling, can be lonely, but it's also sacred. But here's the good news, it's not too late. It's never too late to reclaim the heart of this craft and to teach, to mentor, to listen, to tell the truth about why this work really matters. So, where do we go from here? We go back to the quiet moments where real stories live. We go back to listening, not just hearing, but truly listening with patience and an open heart. We remember the storytelling is not a job or a skill, it's an act of connection. It's how we make sense of who we are, why we're here, and what we'll leave behind. And we start by remembering the stories matter, not because they win awards, not because they trend, but because they connect. Every story worth telling holds a mirror up to the world. It's a reminding that we're not alone. The next generation of potential stories doesn't need us to hand them the answers. They need us to hand them the tools. And that's what I've tried to do these past couple of days. Curiosity, empathy, and courage. On my 2 days on campus, I've talked to people sitting in this hub thing or hut, whatever it's called. Talked to the girl out here. I've talked to the guy at the front desk. I could write a story on several of the people I've met. We also need to show them that the discipline to keep showing up when the words don't come. Anything I've written, remember, that's the polished draft. That's the end. When we read something, we think, God, I could never do that. We need to say, stick with it. We need, as an industry, to create spaces where creativity isn't crushed by comparison, where experimentation is celebrated, where failure is understood as part of mastery. We have to make room for new voices, for different rhythms and perspectives. And I've mentioned in some of the classes, how do we weave in voice, not opinion? How do we use voice? How do we take the perspectives of a whole different generation to see things completely different than I have, that have different ways of seeing the world and making use of that? We have to have stories, especially from those who have been too often silenced by the institutions. And above all, we move forward by listening to the young writers, and I've met many of them here, who are still finding their voice. I've just been doing this longer than you, but I'm no different than anybody sitting out there. Writing is awful, but you have to want to do it. We need to listen to communities whose stories have yet to be told. Portland has had a tremendous homeless problem, and we've covered the institutions and where the money's spent. And when I was still there, I said, why don't we ever go out to the communities where these people put their RVs, where immigrant families are buying their first home and nobody is listening to them? Let's tell those stories. It's easier to go get a quote from the city commissioner. It's easier to talk about statistics. But what about the people we don't talk to? We need to also, and this is the most important, this is what I hope to leave you young people with, is you have to listen to the quiet truth that exists within you right now. If you take nothing away from me being here, I want you to remember that. You have something in you that is worth using and exploring. And that truth is what first drew people like me, Peter, Walter, to what we've done for a career. Storytelling is not a torch we pass on. It's a fire we keep alive together. To the journalists, the students, teachers in this room, anyone who cares about stories, I say this: don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions of others and of yourself. Don't be afraid to write the stories that don't fit the mold. Write stories that bring tears or laughter or hope. I mean, I wrote a story about a parrot getting lost in downtown Portland. They won a national award. It was funny. And to the next generation of storytellers, whether you carry a pen or a microphone or a camera, know this: your voice matters. Your humanity matters. I'm an old guy telling you that. I'm counting on you. Lots of people are counting on you. In a world overwhelmed by facts and noise, the stories are what will endure. Stories told with honesty, compassion, and courage. Stories that remind us of what it means to be human. I've enjoyed my time on this campus. As I was telling Avery, I feel like it's knocked 55 years out of my life. I feel young. I've got like 10,000 steps in a day, which is remarkable. I probably won't see many of you again. You got my email. We'll keep in touch. But I want you to remember this moment like it's a story. To remember these words like I am a pastor speaking to the congregation. Go out there, find the stories, tell them boldly, and tell them with heart. Thank you. You know, it's always kind of weird to be asked questions by your old boss.
Yeah, about that expense report.
This is a man I deeply respect. And I have watched him in the newsroom, and I've watched him interact with students and fellow teachers. This guy's a gift to this institution and to all of you. You're on it.
Wow, I wish the dean was here. Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic, and thank you for being in my classes. It was a great experience for the students, but I enjoyed it very much myself. You talked a lot in different ways about listening, and I think that's really important theme of what you were talking about. You talked about it in a couple of different ways. One was listening versus hearing as a person trying to do a story. The other was listening to yourself and finding yourself, which I mean is very powerful. I think because on a number of different levels. But could you elaborate on that a little bit, both from a journalistic point of view, listening as you go out, you know, to talking about the girl who was the princess whose brother is a Downs kid. You listened to her and got her to open it up. But also listening to our internal voices is a hard thing for people to do because we've got so much going on in our heads all the time.
We lie to ourselves. That's why we don't want to listen to the internal voice. The way I learned to listen was partly from the way I grew up doing those jobs and partly working with the police bureau. I told the story in one class. I showed up there. The guy goes, "Who the hell wears a pink shirt? When did you fall off a turnip truck?" And I came back. And in all my life, I realized late in life, I have always started at the bottom. Everything I've done is about, I decided I wanted to get a martial arts. I did. I want to learn how to play guitar. I did it. I like the process and the journey. And so listening to cops is different than listening to a city councilman. Now, you have to listen with purpose. You have to listen to what's not being said or how a person reacts non-verbally. And I would say, in this way, I would call myself more a cat than a dog. A cat's kind of on alert. You make a fast move, you're going to get clawed. A dog is like, oh my God, you're paying me attention. Listening to people requires me to be non-judgmental. I did a story in the neonatal unit where one baby was born to a crack mom, had this illness problem. Next was a family very religious, same problem. The crack parents never came. Their baby died. And I asked her, where was God? I mean, where was God? And we talked about it because listening is to learn what you don't know. And that can mean, there was in one of your classes, a mechanical engineer. I don't want to even dare ask him anything because I can't figure anything math. But I was asking one student here today. I was talking. I said, what do you think about when you go out? She said, I'm trying to balance desire and stability. And aren't all of us doing that? That's a story. And I have a good, I can pick up people's vibrations. This sounds like ESP or something, but I can get anybody to talk. I really can. From I just can do it. And I think part of it is being very shy growing up. I hung a library. This is how shy I was in college. My freshman year, a girl calls up and says, do you want to come over and study? I said, I already did the homework. I was, yeah. Because I was shy, I had to learn to navigate around different people who might pick on you. I had to learn to be around the athletes, the popular people. I got a D in band playing the drums. I mean, how do you get a D in band? But I think I learned to have survival skills to have confidence in myself. I've I've told my daughters I'm an okay athlete for a 70-year-old guy. I know how to defend myself. Okay. I rode a motorcycle by myself to Sturgis, South Dakota. So if you put me in a situation, I'm not worried. Whatever comes up, I can deal with. And that allows me to ask that question, Colleen, what's the truth? And when I asked that question, I thought about my own brothers. But am I going to call him a hero? I mean, that's a little too hallmarky. There's got to be more to it. So I ask and I listen for the next question.
So how do you internalize that? Because you talked about finding your authentic internal voice. Does that differ or is it the same process?
Great question. I would say I carry the ghost of everybody I've talked to and every experience I've had. And it's made me profoundly reflective. And it's that reflection is very good when I talk to men because they're not used to it. I was at some thing, the guys are having drinks, and I asked this guy, how are things going? And he's talking about his job, and then how are things going? He goes, well, my daughter has had a mental breakdown, and we got a place in Arizona. We're going to pull her out of school. She's going to go live there and go for treatment. He said, thanks for asking. And I told him it's easy for a guy to pick up the bar tab. It's not easy to really talk. And what's interesting about interviewing men is breaking through the shell of the alpha, the tough guy. What's interesting about talking to women is to go, I'm really listening to you. There's no hustle. Tell me what you're thinking. And it's about treating with people with respect and just being. I've told this in one of the classes. If I'm talking to a Hell's Angel, I'm just like I am now. If I'm talking to uh, Billy Graham, just like I am now. I was backstage with Van Halen. I have no persona. I'm just me. And I think people pick up, he's a guy I can talk to.
How was Eddie Van Halen?
He was higher than hell. and then and then I got to watch them play Jump. And it was just fun. I mean, it's better than covering PG's rate increases.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you all should time. So please raise your hands, ask questions, pick Tom's brain. He and I can sit here and
Don't
talk.
be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
I mean, I told you got to talk.
And he and I can talk for hours because, if nothing else, we can go over the parrot story again. But you've talked about, and you talked about it in one of my classes, I think this morning maybe, about how you've always just done your own thing. Newsrooms and news people are slightly crazed. We're a unique subset of the world, and we go into the news business because we want to tell stories, we want to have an impact, and so on. But you always focused on your world. You didn't go out to lunch with the gang. You didn't go out for drinks after work. You were focused on what you were trying to do, and that makes you, I think, a little
Odd.
no, I wouldn't say odd. I would just say unique would be a nicer way to put it.
Odd.
But anyway, talk about that a little bit because I think it's important.
There's three components to that. The way Peter makes it sound like I'm noble. Because I was a police reporter, I learned to be very competitive and not tell people what I knew. Because I was insecure, I judged myself against the other so called star reporters, and I never felt I fit in. And I didn't want to share how I thought. Now, out in the outside world, do it all the time. So I think in the newsroom, I was seen as an oddball who uh, went his own way. But part of it was like being back in high school. I shouldn't have been hired at the Oregonian. I was hired because Bill Hilliard's son was my best friend first through fourth grade.
Who was the editor of the paper?
Yeah, he twisted arms to hire me. And so I think I always felt like I'm not good enough. Part of that then was, all right, you sons of bitches, I'll show you. And I never argue with editors, but I'm like, I am going to do this. And I became fascinated with the process. One of my turning points in life came when John Franklin, first guy to win the Pulitzer for feature writing, came to Oregon State. I called him up. I said, can I come meet you? I brought him like two of my best stories. We sat in his room. He had the goddamn red pen on every line. And I walked out of there thinking, I can go back and pretend this never happened, or I can face the crucible. And I said, I want to learn storytelling. So for me, it was coupling emotions and heart, and then go, what do you do with it? And so I like learning, and I like reading. I'll read something, and I go, how did they do that? I was telling one of these groups today. I'll go to an airport and I'll look at people and go, what makes that person attractive? Or why is he handsome? Why does that person look confident? And I'll say, what is it? Because I can't talk to him. And I'll say, so if I'm talking to somebody, I can pick up things in them that would lead to more questions. I remember reading something about Navy SEALs always know each other in the airport. Like how? And I like talking more to people on the fringe than I ever did in the newsroom. Because the newsroom is a highly competitive place. And award seasons are crack cocaine. I'm telling you, when I lost stuff, it was weird. I had a time where like if you didn't win, that was a failure, and that's a craziness. But in institutions, when somebody is successful, they're set apart. Now, what was great about it in the public, nobody cared about my awards. It's just like that. I like talking to him, so I was able to balance the work world and the story world. At the same time, I kept a balance in my life because I worked 7:30 to 4 when I was a cop reporter. I left every day at 4. I wasn't trying to be hanging around and trying to act. I went home and was a good dad. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I knew how to work efficiently. And in your futures, you need to look for the cracks wherever you work. And you go, I can fill that one. I volunteer for any assignment. You need somebody Saturday night? I'll do it. I never acted like a prima donna because I'm not. But by the same token, they thought, well, he's a good guy. So I lived two different worlds. And so when I retired, I did not want any retirement ceremony. I don't like being on the spotlight. I mean, here I'm talking to you. I would, in the Oregonian newsroom, I talked all around the country about storytelling. I never once was asked to give a class on storytelling, ever. But that's fine. I wrote a column for Quill magazine for 10 years. There was a story about, I learned to say, that's cool, you do what you want. Somebody wrote me after I did one of my stories, and I said, hey, tell me about you. And she told me something. I go, that's a story. I went to my editor. I said, this is a good story. She said, it's not. I said, fine. I wrote Reader's Digest. That's a great story. I don't care. Take me wherever it goes. I never mentioned that again. So I learned in this business, you have to be self-sufficient, and you must be the biggest believer must be you. If you're lucky, find someone who is a true mentor, who has no agenda. It's just like whatever you need. John Franklin was a tough mentor. That looked terrible. I would also say for journalists, rely on the people who are good editors. I've never written a story that wasn't improved by editing. So it is a teamwork for the product. But for me, the art, if you want to call it, is a solo thing. It's kind of like being a songwriter. Like I hear the song in my head, I got to figure out the chords to play. I couldn't go to some editor and go, what do you think? What should I do here? Because they don't know the story. So I am an oddball. I know that. My kids call me quirky.
Well, I think what you should understand about this guy is that newsrooms are full of big personalities because our business even even now attracts personalities. Um, and Tom was never ever a prima donna, was never ever difficult to deal with, was always willing to stop and say, "Hey, what's going on? What's happening with you?" When I was having to make tough management decisions, um, Tom was always there saying, "Hey, man, I know this is difficult. I got your back," and so on and so forth. And that kind of um, that builds credibility because you know that this is somebody you can count on. I spent a lot of time trying to talk you in off the ledge when he didn't win Pulitzers, when he finished second. Think about that for a second.
Twice.
Yeah. See, he still carries it
I
around.
still do.
A Pulitzer category, it depends which category it is, has more than 100 entries. And it gets judged down to 3 finalists and 1 winner. Typically, it can vary occasionally, but that's generally the way it works. So if you're a finalist and don't win, as you were twice, um, that means you were in the top three stories in that category in the Pulitzer competition. That means you made it to the Super Bowl. You just didn't win the game. Um, yeah, that's just like the Blue Jays in the 18th inning last night. I went to bed at about the 11th, I think. But so, um, and he takes that to heart because he wants to be the consummate storyteller. He is determined that's how he judges himself. But
Also, judge because I am insecure, maybe not as much as I used to be. I needed that award to fill a hole in me. I'd won every other one. I'm John Elway before I win. Like, what's wrong with me? And that I had to admit that to myself. Why did I want it so bad? And when I finally won it, it's an 8 by 12 piece of paper. Winning was good. But if I had set my entire life to win that, it wouldn't have been what I thought it was. It was the process of the stories. And so I'm driven by story because I can't turn that, I'm just wired that way. But there's people in this room, some of you, I guarantee it, you have what it takes to do this. One day you could be sitting here, not saying you're insecure. You have to believe in yourself. Now, you're going to have, if this is the pyramid, as I said in one of the classes earlier today, there's literary talent and there's storytelling talent. Storytelling talent is more rare than literary talent. If you look at any one of my stories, you're not going to go, this guy is like, oh my God, what a writer. I'm not that. I write in the way uh, an acoustic songwriter has a song. And they always say if you can take a great song and strip it down to an acoustic guitar and it still works, it's good. But what I have is the marriage between feelings, reporting, and then how to do it. And go do it and fail. When I was taking karate, and I've done these martial arts my whole life, you practiced all this stuff. And your big story doesn't come with a neon sign. It says, here it is. So if you're going to sit around and when it gets to the big one, I'm ready, it won't happen. You have to love covering the boring stuff. You have to love going out when there's 3 inches of snow in Portland and go, I got to make a story out of that because that's practicing the guitar. And that writing is about practicing. But do not forget the thinking. And you can do the thinking tonight, tomorrow. Just think, talk to people. What do you think?
questions? Anybody?
Somebody's got to have something. There's one room with potential journalists.
That's right.
Yeah.
Katie.
So I wanted and recently I switched from psychology to journalism. I'm sure my mom applauded my career. But I applauded. What do you think that we should tell those think that we're great? Like talk about other people.
Want to sell insurance? I mean, I was telling Peter the other day, I have zero regrets out of my career. You will use that psychology background all the time. I wish I had tried theater in college. I wish I had taken some religious stuff, philosophical. You are a scout in the world, trying to explain the world to people that can read it. You're on a noble cause, and you can do it. You know why I can know you can do it? You were a little bit reluctant to ask a question, were you? You were a little bit shy, a little bit thinking, geez, why did I raise my hand, right? That's the first step. And you can see radiating in your face, you want to do this. That's half the battle. Keep doing it, keep in touch. Who else has a question? Okay, it was great. Well, you have to understand, I go to New York, I get this place. The magazine was the editor, a gay guy, me, and 40 women. And they kind of took me under their wing, like, Brooks Brothers jacket. And I was not meant to be a copy. I had this huge desk overlooking Fifth Avenue, and I just wasn't into it. I knew it was bad. If I'd asked the managing editor a question, she said, "Well, you're not listening." If I didn't ask a question, she'd go, "You're not asking." So uh, I got canned, and I refused to call home to ask for money. I stayed in New York, and I saw an ad in the Village Voice where you could be hired to write porno books, and they had a whole list of stuff you should write. Never followed that up. I existed on unemployment. And then I decided I had to move. And I never, when I applied for that job in Hermiston, I said, I've been working in New York. They couldn't believe a guy from New York was coming. I didn't say I was fired. I had a Samsonite briefcase with my lunch in it. Uh, I My parents got divorced when I was a senior in high school, and there was shame involved with it. I didn't tell anybody my entire senior year. There was shame about getting fired. But it's weird when you live through it. Man, I love those scars. That's who I am. If you're a fighter, you're going to get hit. When I won the Livingston Award, I love closing circles in my life. I went back to that magazine, found the managing editor. I said, "Yeah, I won this." She goes, "That's great. We knew you were a storyteller." And that healing, it was like I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when I won the Pulitzer, I think I told this story. I went back to the dump I lived in, knocked on the door of my best friend, the black man from came to New York, sent my family home in a cab, and I walked down Broadway. It's the same route I walked to that stinking job. I walked that route with a girl who lived in my apartment, who I thought I loved. I had a diary. It's like a short story. She wanted to be my friend. And I thought, there's moments in life when you realize where you've come from. And that's what storytelling does. Because every story, like my daughter had a baby, a preemie baby, and I'd done a story in the NICU. I'm going back. I wrote a story on a whim when I took my daughter to preschool. It took me about a half hour. I still get letters on it. So I get to see evidence of what I've done that provides meaning that has nothing to do with the awards. I've been cleaning out my basement and stuff. I have thrown out a lot of the awards, literally got rid of them because I'm thinking, what are my kids going to want with these? Yeah, I keep the big one. But the rest, what are they? The measure of me is not this plaque. It's that I'll be somewhere, they go, Tom Hallman, you wrote Tom Hallman. I remember your stories. Oh my gosh. And I'll say, well, what are you up to? And I get calls. That's what motivates me. But so the getting fired, now it's a fun story to say. Getting fired from New York City, I mean, it's great. It's different than being fired from Hermiston. But see, when I left Hermiston, there was a little stopover. I went to work for the Lake Oswego Review. I couldn't take living in Hermiston. This was a weekly owned by a family, and they were having write stories about people who went to Hawaii for vacation. And somebody had burned a cross on a lawn in Lake Oswego. I was to do a little story, and they said, that doesn't happen here. That happens in Portland. And I quit. So the firing and the quitting and not knowing what I was going to do shaped me because I can talk to somebody who's been fired. I can talk to somebody who's lost a child or been divorced or falls in love. I go, man, I totally get that. Let's talk about it. If you watch me interview, it would be a conversation with purpose. That's a long answer to fire everything. Uh huh.
Great answer.
I can get them to talk. I can get them to talk.
Okay, my question is that an innate ability you kind of learned, or are there strategies you have?
Great question. When I was dealing with police, there was a strategy. I was the Oregonian, which was not a good thing. So I had to be Tom. And I would do stories that they didn't like, but they knew I was a straight shooter. So with the police, I learned to build up reputation. With the other stuff, I just talk to people. I'll give you an example. One day I'll write about this maybe, but I used to go to a coffee shop near the Oregonian, and I'd go in there every morning. And one morning I'm in there, I see this lady sitting there. I walk to the park blocks, I see her sitting there again, and she's sad. The next day I see her, I said, "How you doing? I saw you," and we became friends. And she told me her story. She was from California, married to a doctor. She got breast cancer, and her husband left her. She moved to Portland to start a new life. I was like the first person she met. During our conversations, I would be a story reporter. I asked her once, I said, "So you got a boyfriend now. What was it like the first time you undressed with having a double mastectomy?" And she told me. She told me what her husband told her sons. I still have emails when she moved away for treatment. I was a friend. Then I hear she's dying. She's at the hospital. I talked my way into the hospital to her bed and told her, "Lee, I have all your stories. One day I'll write them." When they had the funeral, her family was there. I knew her better than her family. It was just me having a cup of coffee. So dealing with a cop is different than dealing with somebody else. Now, every person I talk to isn't a story, but it's that vulnerability. And that's what it's about. Be vulnerable. You got a question? Yes. But if it serves the story, I did a story about a woman, Diana's Choice. And I had gone to do a story at the hospital, and I always asked people, "Well, it seemed kind of interesting around here." They said, "Well, there's a nursing home for kids just up the block." So I went up there and I looked around. These kids scared me. They looked you in the eye and they were brain dead. I thought, I want to do a story about that. Now, this gets to somebody asked a question. I thought, how do I tell that? I can't tell the nurse's story because that's their job. I can't tell the kids. I have to tell somebody who decides to put their child there. So I contacted social service people that dealt with those people. I didn't want a prostitute. I wanted somebody who was all American. I found a woman who was out of the Navy, married, had one child, had this one, premature, it got RSV, had a coughing seizure, the heart stopped. I knew uh, so much about her. And some of the stuff that was vulnerable I put in the paper. At one point, she told me, it was in the story, she said, I want to take my one son and run away. I want to leave. Another time, she told me a scene when her mom, and her sister come over. She's distraught in the bathroom. And she says, they offered me a Coke to come out. Think the absurdity of that. Now, I wouldn't say, has your sex life changed over this? I wouldn't ask that, but I asked, what is it like to be a mother to give your child up? And it was to be, she had to do it for her. Now, when I was cleaning through my files, I found an email from Peter. He said, Liz called me crying. And I go, what's going on? And she said, I read this Hallman story. So just because someone tells you something doesn't mean that you're a private eye. But you have to ask the question, why? And I would never, I mean, I knew a lot of secrets about people in Portland. I mean, a lot. I knew from covering cops some very wealthy people that were picking up prostitutes. Never breathed a word to anybody. I hear conversations. I never say a word because information is not a weapon. It's a tool. So that's my moral. And that's a good question. So let's say I'm interviewing you. Would you trust me talking to you? Why? Tell me. And here's why I'm not looking for praise. I'm saying this shows the group how we judge who asks a question. Like when I interviewed these Hells Angels, I said, why did you talk to me? They said, you didn't pretend you were one of us, but you weren't intimidated. You're just you. And I've told many classes here, people have good BS detectors. If you come across as smarmy or nosy or with an agenda, wouldn't talk. I have a friend of mine who used to work at the paper. We had these great philosophical discussions. If somebody wanted to do a profile on you from like Esquire, could they do it? Who would do the story on you? Because we all know the tricks of the interview stuff. And we would say, would you be easier to have a woman interview or a man? Because we know the game. And those were good questions. Like, how would we interview? Good question.
I think we're kind of out of time. Yes, Walter's giving me the hook.
Hey, they had us in here for a half hour. Okay, I really want to thank the administration for bringing me here. It's been a true honor. It's given me deep meaning in my life. I will carry every conversation back with me. It will make me a better journalist, mentor, and guide for you. So I take away a lot of what you gave me. And so it's been beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all.